Hey there, welcome to the show. World leaders are descending on Glasgow for a UN climate conference, COP26, with the goal of ramping up the fight against climate change to stop the planet from warming by more than 1.5 degrees. Canada's new Natural Resources Minister, Jonathan Wilkinson, is headed there tomorrow, but he's with us this morning to discuss this country's priorities at the summit. Nice to see you, Minister. Congratulations on your new gig there.
Thank you.
You were obviously going to go to COP26 as Environment Minister. Now you're going with a different role. And part of the job of a Natural Resources Minister is to support the natural resources sectors, even on that part of the world stage. How do you plan to pitch Canadian oil and gas to global markets, knowing that there are still people out there who believe that we are laggards?
Well, I think that I had the great privilege, as you say, to serve as Environment Minister and be part of putting together Canada's Strengthened Climate Plan. But of course, part of an effective climate plan is also figuring out how you make the energy transition from an economic perspective, how you ensure that there is a strong economy, creates jobs for Canadians across the country. And certainly in this portfolio, it's really about that. It's about energy broadly. Certainly it's about oil and gas, but it's also about renewable energy. It's about mining and forestry, it's about energy efficiency, and it's about clean technology that can enable those kinds of things. So I'm going to be talking about that transition, about how Canada is going to be a leader as an oil and gas producing nation in making that transition in an effective way.
Well, one of the things that you promised in the election, that your government promised in the election, is just transition legislation to help energy workers retrain, reskill in order to work in a different kind of sector, whatever the cleaner, greener future. How quickly would you hope to have that legislation moving, Minister?
Well, that will be a priority, but I would say that, when we talk about the just transition, I think it's important that we actually say what we mean by that, because I think a lot of people get a little confused when we say that with those words. For me, it means economic diversification. It's about creating jobs and economic opportunity, and it's about providing the supports for workers and communities to retrain and to transition to new jobs. And so the legislation will be a part of that, but certainly some of the money that was in the budget last year for skills training, some of the investments like the Clean Fuels Fund for biofuel development, for hydrogen, and a range of those kinds of things are already underway. And so we need to be having that conversation as a comprehensive one piece of which will be legislation, and we will be bringing that forward in the relatively near term.
Do you realize that when we talk about things like transition, that is worrying for people who are working in the oil and gas sector, that is scary, the prospect of change and perhaps even sudden change for their own livelihoods?
Of course, and that's one of the reasons why I prefer to talk about what we mean by transition, about diversification and about job creation. I think that's important. I mean, look, I grew up in Saskatchewan. My family lives in Alberta and Saskatchewan. I'm very sensitive to the concerns that folks there and in Newfoundland and Labrador have. I think it's incumbent on us to be partnering, to look at how we actually move this forward in a way that can be beneficial for all Canadians. And many of the kinds of jobs that we're talking about from a diversification perspective may not be that different from the jobs that exist there today. If you look at a biofuels plant, for example, it's not that different from a traditional energy system. And the same thing would be true with hydrogen. So, we need to have a thoughtful approach to doing this. I've been talking to, both in my past role and my current role, talking to many of the leaders in the energy sector in Alberta. And I would say to you, by and large, the reception I've been given is, let's partner. Let's figure out how to do this.
That might be the reception that you've received. I'm not sure it's the same reception that your colleague, Stephen Guilbeault, has received. The Alberta Premier in particular, believing that he is, quote, sort of a radical activist and not a pragmatist. Have you had any conversations or concerns around Mr. Guilbeault being, too far to the left on this issue and not able to work with Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, and Labrador?
Well, I would say, I think I've said publicly, I would call on political leaders across the country to dial down the rhetoric a little bit. And I would suggest to Premier Kenney that he just sit down with Minister Guilbeault. I've worked with Minister Guilbeault for 2 years, and I've always found him to be a thoughtful and pragmatic fellow who is interested in ensuring that we're following the science, but doing so in a thoughtful way. I mean, people point to his past as an environmental advocate, but he also was a venture capitalist working in the clean tech space. I mean, it's not like the guy doesn't understand industry. So, I just would say, people should sit down and have conversations and perhaps not negotiate through the media.
I spoke earlier in this program with your colleague and probably your friend now, Secretary Flasberth of Germany, about the plan that you were working on to raise the $100 billion from developed nations for developing countries. Didn't get there. It's about $80 billion, according to him. He still seems very optimistic that everything is on track to get there eventually. I wondered, do you think whether Canada needs to increase its commitments? I know that we did, but whether we need to go further in order to push nations further? How do you get countries to spend more?
Well, yes, he has become my friend. We've spent a lot of time together over the past few months, and he is a very, very well-known fellow in the climate circles. Yeah. I would say that the report that we did, Canada and Germany, at the behest of the United Kingdom, has actually moved the ball forward significantly. We've managed to get significant additional commitments from a whole range of different developed countries. And we have shown a clear pathway to achieving the $100 billion goal. We will get there, or get very close to that in 2022, and we will get there in 2023 and overachieve in 2024 and 2025. So I think that the report actually shows enormous progress, and the feedback that we've gotten from almost every group around the world has been extremely positive. Canada was asked to do this, and I think it's a measure of how the world sees Canada as a climate leader, was asked to do this when we were one of the first ones to double our international climate finance commitment that the UK had asked us to do. So yes, we did what we needed to do, and that's why we were able to work with Germany to twist arms to actually get others to do it. Beyond 2025, we're all going to have to do more. There's no question about that, and that conversation will begin at COP26.
There seems to be the beginnings of a conversation, too, not just about giving money to developing nations for mitigation and all that, but also compensation from developed nations like ours to pay for what we have done to the planet. And I noticed that John Kerry was asked about it, seems sort of open to a conversation. Do you think that's the next step after this?
Well, I mean, I think the focus for Canada and for many it remains on providing funds for adaptation in particular, so that people actually do not suffer from significant impacts of climate change, or at least those are managed in as much as they can be. Yes, the developed world, or the developing world, has put forward this conversation around loss and damage. Yeah. I think that's a longer term conversation. I think the focus for us really is on the international climate finance. And to be honest, on scaling that up, I mean, we will achieve the $100 billion in public finance, but we're going to eventually need trillions of dollars, which means we need to mobilize the private sector and private capital, particularly on mitigation projects. And that's the kind of work that Mark Carney has been doing. And certainly he and I have talked very often over the course of the past few months on these subjects.
Okay, Minister Wilkinson, thank you for getting up so early on the West Coast. Have a good time in Glasgow. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much.